for Mary. And what you can see here is, we don't care about the first order. We know that at the first order, kids pass this somewhere around age 4 or so. But what you can see here, percent correct, that you got to be 8 or 9 years old to begin to get this item correct, and performance doesn't become perfect until people are 10. So children acquire a first order theory of mind by the time they're about 3, 4, 5 years of age, closer to 5, but it takes them another period of time before they can handle a second order theory of mind to reason about what somebody else thinks about what somebody else thinks. So again, you can see a nice progressive development here where theory of mind develops, and then second order theory of mind, and later on, nobody to my knowledge has tried to do third order theory of mind in any systematic way. What has happened in the developmental psychology literature, what very commonly happens in developmental psychology, is that psychologists try to push boundaries back. We saw that Piaget argued that children around age 5 or 6 lose egocentricity. Children around age 4 or 5 acquire a theory of mind as represented by the false belief task. But notice that the false belief task is really quite verbal in nature. The experimenter is interacting with the child, and the child's being asked various kinds of questions and has to respond verbally. It's not at all based on a simple verbal inquiry. It looks like children acquire a theory of mind around age 4 or 5, closer to 5. But there are interesting observations that can be made when you run very young children in this task. For example, Clements and Perner, this is the same Joseph Perner, looked at 2- and 3-year-olds on the standard false belief task. Now, remember, 2- and 3-year-old children routinely fail the false belief task. They tell you that the puppet is going to look for the ball in the oatmeal container when the ball in the box when instead of the oatmeal container. But if you look at 2- and 3-year-olds, sorry for that typo there, if you ask them where the puppet will look, they're wrong. They don't identify the correct location. But if you ask them to look where the puppet will look, they're very often right. Okay. So it turns out that even very young children may have an ability to appreciate another person's mental states, but they just can't express this appreciation verbally. They do express it in behavior. This is an old bugaboo in developmental psychology, understanding the difference between a child's competence and his or her performance in some task. Young kids may be able to perform very well in a task non-verbally, even though they can't perform well on the task verbally. This is the origin of that phrase, that babies may be a lot smarter than we think. So what's happened lately is that more recently, have tried to develop theory of mind tasks that are appropriate for administration to infants who don't have any verbal abilities yet. A classic study by René Baillargeon at the University of Illinois and her colleagues employed 15-month-old infants, just a little bit more than a year old, and they developed a totally non-verbal version of the false belief task involving what's known in the trade as violation of expectancies. Now, this is a very common procedure used in infant research, where you take a child, you put him in a situation, you allow the child to become very familiar with that situation, and then you engage in some behavior that violates whatever expectancies the child may have built up. And then, as a rule, doesn't always happen this way, as Berkeley's Professor Joe Campos has pointed out, but in general, infants will pay more attention to counter-expectational events, things that happen that violate their expectancies. So looking time, looking time is a very commonly used measure of expectancies in infant research. So here's what Onishi and Baillargeon did. They developed this wonderful task. It's a really, really, really clever task. It's one of my favorite experiments, and I hope it's one of yours as well, involving 2 boxes on a stage and a plastic piece of watermelon. That's what that is. And what happens on this familiarization trial is that these doors open, and an experimenter comes out and picks up the watermelon and puts it in the green box, not in the yellow box. That's all that happens. Then the experimenter goes away, and the doors close. On the second and third familiarization trials, what happens is the doors open, the experimenter, the actor returns and reaches into the green box. Then the actor goes away, doors close, doors open, the actor comes out and reaches into the green box as well. That's all the infants see, okay? Just those 3 crummy trials, right? Now, what happens is that the experiment then proceeds to what's known as the belief induction trial. And there are 4 different conditions in this experiment. We've got lots of infants, and they've been assigned to one of 4 conditions. One of these conditions is known as true belief green. And you'll see why in a second. Because what happens here is that the experimenter, remember, has put the watermelon inside the green box already and has reached inside the green box. And then the actor watches while on a little pulley, the yellow box moves toward the green box and then moves back. Okay? Nothing happens, except the yellow box moves a little bit. Then there is a condition known as true belief yellow, where the actor appears, and then again, using a little pulley system, the watermelon moves from the green box to the yellow box. Okay? And that's all the infant sees. Okay? Then there is what's known as the false belief green condition, where notice that there's no actor present at all. The doors are closed, the actor is not present, but again, through this little pulley system, the infant watches the watermelon move from the green box to the yellow box. That's it. Okay? And then finally, the most complicated of these things, we're really in Jane Austen land here, is what's known as the false belief yellow. Here, the actor appears, and the actor watches while the watermelon moves from the green box to the yellow box. Then the actor goes away, the doors close, and the watermelon moves back from the yellow box to the green box. Okay? Now, these are 15-month-old infants who are trying to track this, right? It's complicated even for us. So now, what's going to happen on the test trial is that the actor is going to reappear and is going to reach either into the green box or into the yellow box. And the question is, how much time is the infant going to spend looking during these various test trials? Okay? And what happens here is that in the true belief green, okay, where the actor's belief is true that the watermelon is in the green box, the child looks a lot longer if the actor should reach into the yellow box, right? That's the wrong box. Here, where the true belief is that the watermelon is in the yellow box, the child looks a lot longer if the actor reaches into the green box. That's counter-expectational. Here, the false belief is that the watermelon is in the green box, right? And what you'll see here is that the child looks for a really long time if the actor reaches into the yellow box, because she's not supposed to do that, okay? She's supposed to have the false belief that the watermelon is in the green box. Why would she ever reach into the yellow one? And again, here we got this very complicated situation where the actor has the false belief that the watermelon is in the yellow box, and the child looks longer when the actor behaves counter-expectationally, reaching into the green box. What this experiment wants to show us is that even as young as 15 months, these infants have the ability to appreciate what somebody else thinks, what somebody else believes, what somebody else thinks they know, okay, that may be different from what the infant herself believes. Is able to understand this discrepancy and pay attention accordingly. It's a lovely experiment, really, that, as so many really good developmental psychology experiments do, pushes the boundary of these things back. We used to think that before age 4 or 5, children didn't have anything remotely resembling the theory of mind, but as soon as you translate this into a nonverbal version of this task, you can see that even young infants have something like the theory of mind, a very rudimentary ability to appreciate what somebody else knows and to compare that with what you yourself know. Yes?
How do they measure?
Just exactly that way. There's a camera that's focused on the kid, hidden camera, okay? And you can tell, you know where I'm looking right now? Okay? You know where I'm looking right now? You can do that, okay? So you can measure how long the kid looks at this scenario, right? Or whether the kid just kind of looks away or fiddles with its rattle or something like that. That's how you do it. Hordes of undergraduate and graduate research assistants sit around with little stopwatches, timing these things on videos. It's a wonderful technology. It's very labor intensive, but you can do it. Same way people who study reading can track how long people spend looking at a particular part of a page using eye tracking devices. Exactly the same. I left that detail out. It's just a detail. Yes?
In the verbal task with older children, the child actually responds here or there.
Yeah.
And so we can infer that the child knows or believes that it's here or there. It's kind of knowledge effect. Whereas in this task, the theoretician, the psychologist, is equating the length of gaze with a belief.
Yes, that's a... Well, it's a different kind of inference, right? But again, because this is a long, well-established paradigm in studying infants, where, as a rule, there are exceptions, and we have some pretty good idea what those exceptions are. You're going to see one in a minute, actually, where looking time seems to be a good index of what the child is paying attention to. And we know from lots of literature that children, adults, rats, cats tend to look at things that violate their expectations. Okay, so there is a pile of inferences here. But as you'll see in a second, the real important thing is that there's any difference in looking time at all, right? If the child didn't have some appreciation of what the actor thought, whatever the actor does wouldn't make any difference to the child. The fact that there's always a difference, even if these were reversed, you could still say, well, the child is surprised by this, and the only reason the child could be surprised by this is if it's making some kind of comparison to what it knows and what the actor seems to know. And again, you're going to see me reverse this story in just a second. Yes, one more.
Have they ever done studies like the regulated potential region? You can see like inconsistency.
Oh. Yeah, well, that's a really good idea. That event-related potential is known as P300, and it's big when people encounter surprising events. I don't know whether anybody's ever put electrodes on a 15-month-old to do this. I'm sure you could do it. And that would be a very interesting thing to do if you could get the kid to keep them on, right? Instead of just kind of reaching up and ripping these things out of its hair. And you'd expect the same kind of thing. You'd expect, if you could do it, the time course of a P300, we're talking about 300 milliseconds. And this is only one trial. And in order to extract an event-related potential, you'd have to have hundreds, maybe thousands of trials. So I'm not sure you could do it in practice. But in principle, it's a really good idea. Okay? That's all I can tell you about that. Okay, so infants do seem to have some kind of theory of mind. They have some sense of what other people believe, and they have some sense that it might differ from their own. And as I said before, infants generally expect, even 15-month-old infants, generally expect people to behave in accordance with their beliefs. So if the actor thinks that the watermelon is in the green box, but the actor reaches into the yellow box, that doesn't make any sense to the infant. Okay, and they pay attention when they don't. Now, this is work by Rebecca Sachs and Nancy Canwisher. You've seen Canwisher before. She's the fusiform face area person. And yeah, we'll do this now. This is with adults now, okay, not with children. But what Sachs and Canwisher did was to have adults in an fMRI machine, in a magnet, while they were reading stories of various kinds. Some of these stories asked people to reason about what other people believe. So there are some stories about true and false beliefs. The story in question here is there's a boy at home, and he's making some paper mache. And you know how you make paper mache? It's with paper and flour and water and all of that. And he needs some glue, and he doesn't have any, so he leaves his project on the kitchen table and goes off to the 7-Eleven to get some glue. Meanwhile, his mother comes home, sees this mess on the table, and throws it all out. He comes home and says, what did you do with my project? Right? So here, you've got the mother having a false belief about what the boy was doing. Then there's a story about mechanical inferences, where there's a tea kettle that was left boiling on the stove all night, and there was no water left in the tea kettle the next morning. You can reason that that's because all the water in the kettle evaporated, and that's right, but you're not reasoning about what somebody else wanted or believed or felt. You're reasoning about a purely mechanical operation. And then there's another story involving human action, but not involving true or false beliefs. There's a woman walking to work, and she sees a crane near her building, and she makes a detour around the crane so that nothing is going to fall on her. But still, it's a story about human action, but it's not a story like this one that involves true and false beliefs. And what Sachs and Canwisher discovered was that there's a particular area of the brain up here in the temporal parietal junction. There's the temporal lobe. there's the parietal lobe, there's the occipital lobe back here, but right here at the junction of the temporal and the parietal lobe, that area is activated when people are reading and trying to understand stories that are about true and false beliefs. This same area is not activated when people read stories about mechanical processes, and this area is not activated when people read stories about human action that doesn't involve true or false beliefs. So they call this basically a theory of mind area, okay? An area of the brain that is activated when people are trying to reason about what somebody else thinks or feels, believes, wants, and so forth. Another nice example of social cognitive neuroscience where you've got a well-described task, really good controls, as these people have, and you can see what part of the brain seems to be activated when people perform various kinds of tasks. Okay, so there we have it. At the ontogenetic level, we can equate social cognition with the possession of a theory of the mind, the idea that other people have beliefs that may differ from our own, and that we expect people to behave in accordance with their beliefs. We've seen how we can push back the boundaries for the development of a theory of mind using very clever nonverbal kinds of tasks, and we've also seen how we might be able to localize this function in the brain using, again, variants on these kinds of tasks. Next time, we'll finish up the ontogenetic view, and I'll have something to say about the phylogenetic view of the development of theory of mind, and finally, even a cultural view of the development of theory of mind. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you very much.